Welcome to the famous and exciting episode 60 of the World Builder's Anvil. As always, I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram, and today's topic, storytelling from a framework-based world. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. All right, I want to start off this episode and I want to give a little heads up to people. You've maybe noticed there's been a few mentions of how I've fallen behind in the last few weeks. I'm having some serious personal issues going on right now, and where they don't directly involve me. Well, they do, but they're not my problems, but they've become my problems. It's preventing me from being able to do interview episodes. So there's going to be a period of time where I'm not going to be able to have the time to be able to do interview episodes, and I apologize for that. However, the 3 weekday episodes will be going on as scheduled, and if I get a chance, I will try and throw together something from my previous interviews, sort of a best of kind of thing, best of answers kind of thing. But it's only if I get a chance. And I do apologize to people who enjoy those episodes. I enjoy those tremendously. And I hope that you can forgive me this little period of time. And if you can do anything to say, hey, keep up the faith, keep the episodes coming, I will. I will do the best I can. It's just very difficult right now with circumstances in my life. Let's get into something that I'd rather talk about, which is storytelling from a framework-based world. And when I've talked before, I always talk about a framework-based world. And once again, I'm not going to specifically say what that is because I'm cruel and unusual. It is the game master in me. However, the generic idea of what a framework-based world is it's a world where a lot of the structure is set. And you'll see this frequently in role-playing settings, where they will give you briefs about different countries of the world, maybe some of the important characters, histories, this type of thing to get you going. However, it is your job at that point to make stories happen. And it's a little different than people who create worlds around the stories they want to tell. And I find that an amazing thing to do. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other one. It's whatever works better for you as a storyteller and a world builder. I think typically if you're creating a game, whether it be a video game or a role-playing game, you're probably forced to operate from a framework-based world where things are sort of structured out for you and you can build upon them as needed. But the first thing you have to do is when you're trying to create your story, as in any stories, you need to outline your story. What is the basic plot flow of the story? You know, what is the climax of the story? Where there'll be something leading you into another story at the end, or maybe it's a one-shot story. But you need the arc of your story at a minimum. If it is a series of stories, you need your overarching story as well too. And once you have those two pieces in place, it will free you up to do some other things. And the first one I like to do is pick a location for the story. And the reason I like to pick the location before anything else is what interested me in my framework world that I want to talk about. It's like in my first series of stories that are going to come out, in those first series of stories that come out, what's going to happen is I'm going to sit in the world that I'm most comfortable in. I have the most development. And that way, I won't be doing a lot of new world building for it. And it will be a feel that I'm more comfortable with. However, as I develop and mature as a writer, I hope to go into other parts of my world where you get further away from your typical Western style cultures. And where I feel most of my Western style cultures, except for maybe the Shiftarians, are pretty unique in their feel. The Shiftarians, I will say up front, are really Roman heavy, just because that period of time I find very fascinating, and there's a lot of elements of it I find fascinating. But outside of the Shiftarians, there are certain feels that you'll get from cultures, but they shouldn't feel like a culture that you've experienced before, hopefully. You know, you have to pick the location that works for you. If you want to push yourself as a storyteller and make yourself better, you always have to increase your own difficulty level. It's kind of like playing a video game. If you play it on casual mode all the time, you can maybe rock the game and have fun. But if you want to get better at playing the game, you're going to have to up your difficulty level. And that will make you play the game better. And, as the person who's, in this scenario telling the story and wanting to improve your skills, it's going to be up to you how far you want to push yourself into what level. Me, I like to push myself pretty hard. First series of novels are going to be in this one part of the world. I have my Minotaur story that I've talked about a little bit, the Minotaur Wanderings. It's going to sort of pop all over my world and give you sort of neat glimpses of the areas I'm going to start storytelling in and other places I might go to later. The next thing is to pick the proper time and place. And this sounds like picking a location, but is not quite the same. So when I say pick a location, it's sort of geographically speaking. This is the part of the world I want to tell the story in. These are the cultures that are around there. But when you're picking a place, it's like literally, this is the town or city or farm, or these are the different actual places the story is going to be taking place. And the time would be, what is the time setting? And the story itself might not need a specific time setting. If you take sort of a sort of classic story arc, which is, a hero rising up and defeating evil, you don't need it to be medieval. You could do it in the Stone Age. You could do it in the Space Age, or anywhere in between, or I guess beyond the Space Age. I think it would just be more difficult to write that story. I think you'd have to do a lot of research, and I don't know how you could sort of tie it back to people quite so easily. Once you have the places set and the time period that is set, which is either a time period you want to tell the story in, or maybe there are certain things in your story that cry out for a certain time period. Once you have those two things set, go through your notes on that part of the world. Find any characters who you either want to use as maybe the protagonist or antagonist or supporting characters. And they all might not exist. But if there are ones that you want involved in there at any level, just pull them aside and put them in your software. I use Scrivener. Put them in your software to where you can easily access the information about the characters. And then we come to the mapping part of it. So you're probably going to have at least generic overworld maps of the area you're working in. Some of the specific places for the scenes, sketch out a map of it if you don't have one already. Maybe you do. It depends on how well fleshed out the world is. But, especially like if you're in a hamlet, don't feel that it needs to be a perfect representation of what the hamlet is. It should be close, though, because, one, it'll let you visually refer back to something when you're trying to get action set through there. So you need to know how it looks to be able to have action flow through an area. The easiest way to do that is to sketch something out. Now, it could be in your mind, and you can try and work it from your mind, and if you're good with that, that's fine. But my thought is to sketch it out, and then you can refer to it again later, and it will help ensure continuity in the story itself. And for other places that you do have existing maps for, bust out those maps, sort of review them, start picking specifically within that area. Maybe it's the tavern so that the party can meet together at the corner table, drink some ale, and have fun with the wenches, and then get kicked out for harassing them. You're really kind of drilling down to figure out, before I start my story, let me go back to my outline set. Where are the places of the story going to happen? Where do I want the scenes to happen? Do I know what those scenes look like? It helps get it in your mind for when you get to the next step, which is the most important step, which is write your first draft. Just go down, write it down, however many words it takes. Just write out your story. It will tell you the length of it. If it's a novel, it's going to go 60,000 words plus probably. If it's, 30 to 60, it's a novella. And if it's shorter than that, it's kind of a short story or flash fiction. Don't try and force a word count out of the story. If the story is 1,000 words, make it 1,000 words. If you're strong enough and you're a good enough storyteller, you can tell a story over any word count you want. It's a question of how many more scenes do I want to help develop certain parts of the story. Now, the rating for this episode. This is a no rating episode because there's no reason to rate this episode because this is just information. So there's really no rating on this, and I don't even know if all of you are actually world building for storytelling. I would hope so. Even if it's just for yourself, it's a great exercise. Even if you're just doing world building to educate yourself, write some stories about your world because that will help you get in the mind of the people who are in that world. The world builder's task for the day. I will always try and have these. The world building task for the day is quickly go through this process, take something that you've already built, even if you don't normally do this, and create a new story reusing locations that you have. And you don't necessarily need all of the places to have already been created, but you want like the general location and cultural information. And even if this is just a short story exercise for yourself, take the time to sketch it out in locations you've already created, or for the most part have already created, and flesh it out and do a story. Whether it's 1,000 words, whether it's a novel, whether you plan to share it or not, it's an exercise for you to do, to just do it. And why not? The real world task for the day. Do your best, but be willing to make compromises. And I've done something, I believe just last week, talk about, trying your best to keep integrity. And this sort of flows from that, and because of the stuff going on in my life right now. Keeping integrity does not mean that you have to always get done what you need to. However, the point is, if you ever get to a point where you know you can't, be upfront, let people know. That's the reason why at the beginning of this episode, I'm like, hey, I know there's going to be a period of time. I just don't physically have the time to be able to deal with doing interviews and scheduling them and getting them connected. I'm only one person, and I also work full time outside of this, and I'm having personal problems. And I don't need to be specific on what any of the reasons are. I just want to let you have a basic idea that there is a problem that I'm dealing with, and because of that, there will be a sacrifice, and unfortunately, it has to come from the thing I really get comfort from, which is doing the show. The tease for the next episode. What's around the corner? Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet. And yes, I just saw Ultron, and I saw the end of Ultron, and it's a trailer part, and there will be spoilers, be warned, but it's something I just want to talk about because I found it an interesting story, and I want to see where they go with it. And as always, make sure to go to gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to, and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Gardul.com, to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.